Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering Fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, I'm joined by Keegan Bell, Executive Vice President at the Irvine Public Schools Foundation, one of California's most successful education-based fundraising organizations. Keegan brings deep experience in creating donor strategies that go beyond transactions, focusing instead on building layered relationships, connections that involve staff, board members, and community champions, all working together to cultivate and steward lasting donor relationships and partnerships. In this episode, we're going to unpack how organizations can build a culture of shared responsibility for fundraising, where staff and board work hand in hand to deepen relationships and drive sustainable support. So thanks for joining me today, Keegan.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I am too. It's going to be a great one. So let's go ahead and jump in. But before we kind of jump into our topic for today, I'd love to get a little background on you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey in the nonprofit space?
Excellent. Happy to. I've spent over 2 decades now serving nonprofit missions across education, youth development, healthcare, environment, and performing arts. So I've kind of touched each cause area. Actually, my origin story, I grew up at a youth development summer and after school organization. What now operates as Girls Inc. of Orange County. Used to serve boys as well. I started attending there when I was 5, when my mom started working there. And then when I aged out of the program in high school, I started working there in the summers, teaching various theater and sports programs. It was really kind of a touch base into the program end of nonprofit work when I really didn't have probably a full appreciation of what it was. So I went off to college and I first pursued a theater major, theater and social justice in San Francisco, very San Francisco. And I ended up transferring to become an English major because I thought that was more practical at the time. I tried to make my way of it in the Bay Area, and I eventually came back to Orange County. And it was Shelley Haas, who was then the executive director of Girls Inc., that introduced me to the nonprofit, administration side of the house. So she encouraged me to attend an AFP meeting. And it was at that first luncheon that I was very fortunate to sit next to who would become one of my first mentors, Kathy High Street, who was just so happened to be hiring for an entry-level development associate role with a dementia care day facility in Huntington Beach called Alzheimer's Family Services Center. So I'm a learner by nature. So really from day one, I continued to ask for the opportunity to participate in bigger projects, learn, from doing, and really asking the why behind why we were doing things. Right. And I really think it's this curiosity that keeps me charged today to continue to ask those questions and motivate team members to remain curious about what's next. Not just for the organization, but also what's next for their own professional development.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying curiosity, mentioning that because it is such a critical characteristic of fundraisers and leaders, generally speaking. You have to have that. professional curiosity. So thanks for bringing that forward. And it sounds like Kathy was a mentor to you. You said maybe one of your first professional mentors. I did want to ask you, who were your mentors throughout your career, and what were the sorts of influences that they provided to you?
Yeah. Falling in, I think as many do in this profession, falling into fundraising, it was really learning from each and every person. And I reflected back as I started professionally, post-college, into all that volunteer work that I did, and I participated in so many fundraising events, and participated in met board members and recognized that sense of relationship building and how important that was. So in my professional career, I've been fortunate to have both mentors and executive coaches who've really modeled what leadership looks like. And one of the most important things I think for me is learning how to create spaces where all voices are heard, and where we really use empathy, and our own personal experience, and experience the missions that we are serving, so that we can be able to share that story.
Yeah.
I was fortunate, we worked together during my time when I was at the wooden floor, and I had the privilege of working under Dawn Reese, who remains a really good friend and mentor to this day. And she really modeled this people first leadership philosophy, where all team members were encouraged to participate, especially those that didn't work on the programs team, to sit in on programs, meet with students, meet families. And that's how we really got connected to mission. And what I recognized is this is how we refill our cup, right? This is how we, the hard work of building new relationships and going after the next donation, without that kind of refill, it felt draining. And so it really gave me a reminder of the importance of making sure that I was sitting in with our program enough that I can build my own personal stories, so that I always had something new to share with my donor conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so wonderful. I took a couple of notes. The first is Falling into Fundraising, which I think should be the title of my next book.
Right.
You talk to people of a certain generation in fundraising, and everyone has that "I fell into it" story. Not so much anymore, which is great,
Right.
the professionalization of it. But the second is the refilling of the cup. And I think that needs to be a fulcrum white paper, because it's one of those things that I don't think people or leaders take enough time to appreciate. The job, no matter what it is in nonprofit, is draining for anyone and everyone. And some people get refilled because the culture, the leader, the organization does a better job of refilling that cup on a regular or daily basis, and some don't. So
Right.
thanks for bringing that forward. You've had a ton of different roles, different organizations, different sectors represented in the work that you've done. I'd love to know what your favorite kind of role has been. It doesn't have to be the position necessarily, but maybe what is it that you've done in fundraising that you've enjoyed the most of all of the different kind of responsibilities that you've had?
Yeah, I like positioning it as not a specific position, but as a role. Because for me, what I love most about fundraising and greater nonprofit leadership is strategy. I've always felt most at home as a strategy guy, where I've really been able to align mission, values, and resources together. I think too often development directors, chief development officers, sometimes aren't able to participate in strategic planning conversations, or get a true understanding of an organization's overall positioning and visioning. And I think that's a real barrier. And I know for myself, when I've been able to really own and participate in that visioning exercise and that strategic planning, that's when I'm able to translate it and help each a donor, each a volunteer, and our partners see themselves as part of the story. And it's really powerful when you're able to translate that. And at the same time, ensuring that each team member also shares that same sense of ownership, that it's their story, right? So
Good, good. Now that's wonderful to hear when I ask this question of others. It's not consistently the same for everyone. So I love hearing your interest and passion around strategy and how it connects you to the mission, connects you to what's going on in the future, and how you can be a better ambassador and fundraiser. You hear a lot about the people side, or whether it's donors or board members or staff, and strategy kind of connects you to all of those. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
wonderful. You mentioned a minute ago, people first. I'm wondering, is that how you would describe your nonprofit leadership philosophy, or is there something else that would sort of be a guiding light to you in this leadership space?
Yes, I mean, certainly I think people first is there. I was asked this recently. It evolves, I think, right, with us throughout our careers. I think for me, kind of where I am at now, my leadership philosophy is twofold. It's leading authentically, and always with a servant heart. I think servant leadership, it has become a little bit overplayed as genuine as it tends to be.
Fortunately, everything
Right.
good does get overplayed, right?
Exactly. But for me, I strive each day to help my team members, board members, as well as our investors, our prospective supporters, to see the bigger picture of the community needs that we're seeking to address, but also to see their role in it. I believe when we can align people around purpose, and then help provide clarity, that really empowers shared ownership into the impact in the outcomes we're hoping to achieve. And being authentic also means admitting when things don't go wrong or don't go right. And what have we learned from that? I think ultimately that really helps build trust, which is, as you know, is a key driving for long-term engagement with staff and our external stakeholders. So I think that's how I would describe my leadership philosophy.
Yeah, I love it. So important. Well said. Thank you. All right. So with that, we can now jump into the topic of the day, which is layered donor relationships. And just to sort of kick things off, can you please describe what layered donor relationships means in your work at the Irvine Public Schools Foundation?
Yes. So I think most simply, layered relationships means that no donor has just one connection with our organization.
Okay.
We know and we've heard of, if we haven't experienced ourselves, territorial fundraising, where each person's portfolio is protected and theirs because they know them best. I would argue the opposite of that. I believe when we intentionally build multiple strategic touch points through various staff members, board members, in our case, with our district and school campus leaders, and even students and fellow parents, donors get to experience the organization as a living, breathing ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? Relationships are the currency of our organization, not just our development team. So everyone begins to see themselves as ambassadors, and thereby donors feel a more genuine connection to the mission. That's where I've seen it work most effectively.
Yeah, yeah. And so it becomes this shared responsibility for the cultivation of donors. And I was just taking another note because I think it is um, such an important concept that hasn't necessarily taken hold. Um, and for a variety of reasons, but more often than not, you're probably right that most supporters of an organization only have one main or primary contact, which is very fragile should anything
Mhm.
happen to that person, right? And it would be much harder for an individual to fall off the map or get disengaged if there are multiple people that are connected to that individual, right? And is that why you think it's so important for shared responsibility across staff and board, maybe rather than just the development team, or are there other reasons?
Yeah, I certainly think that's part of it. I think by donors experiencing and understanding that there are multiple people behind your organization, it shows a deeper sense of earnest and care that we see them as people and not just their financial investments, right? There's a whole team that's caring and nurturing and stewarding the resources that are entrusted to us. Um, it also shows that we are coordinated, right? As practical to it, there are multiple people. There's not just one person you can go to if you have a question, if you have a new idea to share. And I think that deepens the level of relationship with across multiple team members. Um, practically, I think I've also experienced that it's been helpful with multiple levels of contact. We all know how email inboxes, especially during this fall busy season, get, right? Just that there's multiple points of contact means that we don't miss or there's a lapped conversation. We're able to timely respond to our supporters. But it is that resilience piece. When one person potentially leaves the organization, the trust doesn't leave with them. The relationship doesn't leave with them. Um, and I also think that various team members and board members connect with our supporters on different levels and different communication methods. And I think, again, this also creates a much more holistic and rich relationship between ourselves and each donor.
Yeah, it's so true. It's great. It's amazing. And how do you go about strategically deciding who should be involved in each donor relationship between the sort of staff, the board member, or even volunteers sometimes, I imagine.
Yeah. So at the initial level, we set kind of parameters around mapping levels of donors and making sure that every donor receives some sort of a personal touch point, right, as a starting point. As our donors matriculate between our mid-level and into our major donor arena. We build much more intentional relationship teams, where it involves both kind of the natural connector, right? Whether that was a board member, an external stakeholder, another donor that had the initial tie. And then it also may include a program lead for a program that they're particularly invested in, someone on our development team, and then our CEO or another executive leader to really kind of help cast that vision piece. So it's really about aligning who's the team that makes sense to really kind of give the most holistic viewpoint to this donor.
Yeah, that's great. Totally makes sense. And I love how it's actually kind of in your process to map this out and be very intentional about it. So thanks for saying that it's not just something that happens by luck or just occasionally. It's an afterthought. It's intentional, which is important distinction to make. Can you walk us through an example of how a donor relationship grew stronger because of this layered approach?
Sure. One of my favorite stories, I think, we talk about the culture of philanthropy and the importance of it. But I think culture of philanthropy in this kind of layered approach, one example that really sticks out when I was with a former organization, a new prospective donor reached out for a drop-in. It was near the end of the year. So our programs and our students were on holiday break. The front desk program staffer had been trained enough to understand the potential for gifts, especially around year end. And so transferred on the call instead of just saying we're closed for the holidays.
My God.
Right.
Yeah.
So I invited the prospective donor and their financial advisor for a tour of the organization. And again, I made sure, level set, right, that our programs were dark, but we still had a wonderful center to tour. And I made sure that I met her at the reception desk and I introduced her to that staffer that she first talked to, right? Because it's about meeting them where they are. And also, I think I recognized the importance of our donors and prospective donors to enter the organization the way that our participants enter the organization, right? And our front staffers are trained and have a skill set that it just naturally oozes the mission of the organization. So during the tour, the prospective donor made it clear that she wanted to make an initial donation before the year end. So as we came to a close on that tour, I invited our CEO to come out to meet the supporter and be able to thank her personally. And over time, the supporter and her advisor mentioned how much they enjoyed meeting the team, and also how they had looked to schedule other visits with organizations who had said, they were dark for the holidays. And so what a missed opportunity for them.
What a mistake.
But over the years, this supporter grew and identified college scholarships as a passion point. So that involved inviting her to participate in a student celebration, specifically around high school graduation and college enrollment. And this led to her first multi-year major gift commitment. And now I know she has made a large endowment gift in this area because she's been able to see and hear those first stories of the students that she's been able to keep in college as a first in the family. So,
love it. Great story.
Yeah,
great story. And I loved how you talked about introducing that person to the person they first spoke to on the phone to make that connection and real relationship building exercise. So that's great. Are there particular systems or tools that you use to keep everyone aligned to ensure communication is consistent and intentional? I think I heard you mention the mapping exercise, but what are the tools? What are the systems that you use?
Yeah. First and foremost, a shared CRM or whatever that means for you is essential. It could just be a spreadsheet. I like to keep things as simple as possible, and also where the team members will actually use it, right? We've all experienced whether it's an executive leader, certainly our board members aren't in our CRMs, but what is a simple way to communicate the meaningful kind of points of that contact, whatever it was, so that we can make sure that we're coordinated and we can take the next logical step. So we really made sure that we create kind of a transparent point of communication. So once our donors kind of matriculate, as I mentioned, to that major donor, that the relationship team knows who's on the team. And so they know it's their responsibility to each other, that if they're going to make an outreach to each donor, that they loop in whether it's either kind of through ahead of that communication, they're making points aware, or they're copying various team members on, and so then again it could build much more of a conversation, not just kind of a one-way donor outreach. So those are just kind of a couple of things that I've found have been really essential to make sure that we're keeping that, and so it's not just staying within one person's brain of where kind of the donor is in their individual journey.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. Good. Thank you for sharing that. We need to make sure that we're communicating properly that this is an initiative to develop broader relationships beyond just the employees of the organization too. It's not just the CEO or the development team, it's program staff, but even more, it's the board. And I know many nonprofit leaders struggle to really get their boards truly engaged in fundraising, in cultivation activities even. So what approaches or habits have worked best for you to engage your board members in this process?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. I think first, we have to recognize that not every board member is comfortable fundraising, right? And they don't need to be. But I think we need to reframe it to make sure they understand what donor engagement means. That, we take away the fear and the guilt of what that, they need to know how to do it all, to take the donor from initial conversation all the way to solicitation. Not every board member is comfortable asking for money, or at least, truly soliciting, but everyone can open a door. Everyone can make an introduction, and everyone can be trained to share their story. And as a way of doing so, thank a donor at the very level. So I found it really effective with multiple organizations to build kind of more strategic roles for board members, so that they don't feel like they have to do it all, but they also are able to share those wins, right? And then I think it's really powerful. We could say it until we're blue in the face as staffers, but when they see a fellow board member share out, what they did, how they did it, and then what was the outcome of that, others are like, oh, that's all you did? That doesn't sound so hard, right? And so it takes some of the stigma out of it. And then it starts to just create this really great momentum. It's like, not only, I think they feel a different sense of ownership, right? Like, oh, if Larry's doing this, right, I need to be able to do this too, to sit on this board.
Yeah. Well, let's keep talking about that. I love that idea of asking board members to share out their experience of a successful donor engagement or participation in the cultivation process. That seems like such a better way of encouraging them to do something because their peers are giving them the modeling that is so helpful. Are there other ways that you train them? Are there specific tasks that you assign to them? Is there accountability mechanisms that you install, or do you give them access to portals? Do you give them a prospect lists and scripts? Like, what are some of the ways that you help them participate in this layered approach?
Yeah, I think it's essential that, we not just give our board members toolkits, but we really engage with them on kind of whatever those tools and resources are, so that we're making sure that they're resonating with them. And so it's a practice that we look at each and every year, so that our one pagers really resonating with the kind of the most natural talking points for our board members. What have the reactions been when those board members have shared that right out in the community? what kind of reactions, what kind of follow-up questions are they receiving, and do they need kind of talking points to those follow-up questions? Right? Because I think the fear of having the conversation often is like they're going to ask me something I don't know, and I don't know how to respond to that. And so I think it's really helpful to walk them through that. And I really think it's getting the board members really comfortable that the most important part is to share why they care, why they've chosen to invest, why they've chosen to participate in a leadership role with an organization, because that speaks volumes, right? And that's where they should be most comfortable, right? Talking about their own personal why. But I think people often leave that out, unfortunately. And so I think it's getting them to share that. And I think when they, especially when we take time to share that within a meeting, they pick up on other pieces of other people's whys, and they're like, ah, it just like deepens and reaffirms, right? Why we're all here. So I definitely think those tools, we developed kind of more official decks for folks if they ask for them. But we really kind of lean on talking points as the most kind of natural reflection, so that I think when we get into a kind of a more formal donor engagement piece, they're usually making the introduction to someone on the staff team, right? To help to be another resource. And then my engagement with them is always, I want them to stay as involved as they want to be. I think it's really important. If they were the introduction, that they need to stay involved. Doesn't mean that they have to solicit, but it does mean they need to be there as we talk about, what that investment might mean to the organization. And I think when they hear what a solicitation talk sounds like, they're like, "Oh, that didn't sound too scary. That didn't, you weren't, really transactional in that experience." And so I think they also have this kind of preconceived notion of what, asking for money is. We're not all used car salesmen trying to sell, the worst car on the lot.
Right. And if you teach them that if you've done a really good job through the cultivation and sort of learning process, that oftentimes there might not even be an ask required. It's
Right.
more just a conclusion of a conversation that leads them to agree to support a program without even someone having to say, "Will you please consider a gift of?" Um,
Exactly.
because they've been brought along, they want to support the effort and the initiative, and oftentimes having a peer there encourages them to move forward more seriously, right, than just
Mhm.
maybe a development person or someone on staff who can be more easily dismissed, or a request forgotten. So I love that element of it, and what's fascinating is that board members can participate in this layered approach in so many different elements of the solicitation cycle, right? Either from the invitation, so getting someone new to an event, to inviting them to some more serious engagement like a tour or a VIP experience, a classroom or a training or whatever it might be. And then obviously there's the engagement on an ask, perhaps. There's the opportunity to thank someone for their gift, which is a very distinct opportunity to put them into that layering, right?
Right.
Um, what I was going to ask about was um, sort of how many different people there might be assigned to an individual donor when they are in that major gift category. So whatever that might be, 10,000, 100,000, I don't know. But um, at some of those higher levels for the organization, how many different contacts are you generally including on a particular constituent relationship?
Yeah, generally, I would say, I think the kind of happy number for us is a numbers of three, right? And so generally, someone on leadership team, hopefully a board member, or someone they see as a peer, and then either someone on our programs team, um, uh, or right another level of maybe development staff member. So
I think
I,
we get down to brass tacks. This is the important stuff. So if someone's thinking about, well, I need to institute this layered cultivation strategy, layered donor relationship strategy, I should be endeavoring to have how many? You say, magic number might be three, executive team, board member or volunteer, and program side, right? That seems magical to me.
yeah, and I think it helps um, the kind of the triangular strategy, right? And right, you want someone on the more details end, to make sure that things are moving along, the pacing is right, right? That kind of falls usually on your development team or whoever that strategic lead is. But you always have that relationship builder within the executive team, to talk about that longer term vision, to talk about kind of what's next with the organization. And then you have that other kind of external relationship, that board member, that fellow donor, that helps inspire and tell another kind of why story, especially to a prospective donor to hear, that I think is really powerful. So I think each person also then kind of plays their part, so that they don't have to do lifting that doesn't feel authentic. Right? You can have a director of development that casts vision, but it doesn't resonate the same way, right? That executive leader can do it. And same thing, right? I can't speak about an organization from an external lens when I'm, staffed by it. So I think, right, you each can play your own unique role and play off each other. And I think that relationship, see a donor seeing kind of the depth of relationships you have as a team is really impactful as well.
Yeah. Well, it appears to me that one of the challenges is getting into a situation where everybody who is responsible for donor engagement of some sort on this team points at each other and says, well, it was his or her
Yeah.
responsibility to do that. So
Right.
you might have been alluding to this, but I want to point it out very specifically. There's probably someone that is really seen as the manager of the relationship or the primary, even if it's a triangle with equal part, like someone needs to actually be responsible, and then maybe even tasking or staffing the other two or three or four people who are part of this layering to do other things, right? So there does have to be a clear, responsible person assigned to each donor, right? Or donor, each
100%.
donor relationship.
100%, yes. There needs to be a driver at all times, right?
Okay.
That's when I think it can't get so loose, that someone doesn't know kind of what the next direction is. And I think that driver not only deciding what's next, but also is the one that makes sure that they kind of connect the dots between the other layered relationships, so that they can debrief after whatever, if it was a kind of a live conversation or meeting, to make sure, is there anything that you picked up on that we know we need to integrate or adjust our strategy based on that, as well as then decide kind of as a group what's the next step going to be. And it's often that tactical person that makes sense to make that invite or move that conversation along and bring along, invite others into that, right? So I think that positions the organization well, and shows kind of like multiple levels of competency within an organization.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's plenty of organizations out there that even just struggle to have every prospective donor and every donor assigned to someone
Right.
that's going to take responsibility for engaging them, and going the step further, like we're talking about, is this idea of then layering additional people into the fabric of this relationship, where you still have to have that one person that takes responsibility for organizing, orchestrating, leading, whatever you want to call it, the relationship. So that's
Yeah.
pretty.
I mean, just to make sure that's clear, I mean, let's be real. We can't do this for every single one of our donors, right? You always have to prioritize. And so it depends on what that means for your organization, right? But I'd say even smaller shops, you can focus on your top 50 donors, right? That is a group I think that you can really make, and as we know, that's where a majority of our resources are coming from anyway. And so if we don't have that kind of pipeline filling it and backfilled, we get a sense if any of those relationships are no longer healthy within the organization, that we need to start more heavily working on acquiring
Yeah.
more. But I do think it is a natural kind of starting point because right, we don't all have teams of 20 fundraisers that can be assigned larger portfolios and bring in kind of these triad teams.
But interesting thought. And it's very true what you said, to get that sort of individual attention, it's not likely to be able to do that authentically with a database of 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 or more. So you're going to have to focus or concentrate on your top whatever number of donors, prospective donors, with this very involved strategy. But interestingly, given the increasing capabilities of technology, it would seem to be more capable for now other members of the organization, thinking about the triad, if you will, to be engaged in communication electronically, digitally, whatever, with every person in the database. So, maybe there's one letter that comes from the executive director, the CEO, right? Then there's an email that comes from a board member who might or might not be connected, but a different voice. And then a third piece of communication at some point that comes from a program person. And so that you're not only limiting a one voice per prospective donor who might or might not be with the organization in 4 months, right? But just a variety of voices. So, I don't know how frequent or common that is right now to think about the different voices that are coming across from an organization and developing those relationships early, during the annual fundraising efforts before they get to the major gift realm. But something to consider, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Practically, I'll tell you a couple of things that we found really surprisingly effective with that digital within the annual fund specifically is we build a position-based email accounts for our board chair, our CEO, and then each member of our leadership team. So, right, you have your personal email, you have your, I have my EVP Outlook account, right? That can be used for communication, for specific strategic communication. And so we do make sure that there is a different voice, right? It certainly leads with the CEO as the first kind of point of contact, but then different layers of conversation are from different leaders within the organization. So they do get to know at every level of gift, they're getting to know various members. And the other side is, I think the best way to get your development coordinators, your development associates, those within your team, to really get more experience with kind of more frontline fundraising is by involving them in stewardship.
Yep.
Every level of donor can be thanked if they're given at the very least digital communication outreach, and we make sure we focus on new donors, on first time donors specifically. And then I'll tell you, I continue to hear from those staffers when they're just so tickled when they get a response back from that donor that appreciated that personal thank you.
Right.
And they're able to sniff it out, right? You're able to tell when you have a canned response or when you have an actual live human being writing you, even if it is just a simple email. So I think that makes a huge difference.
Good, good. No, that really feels like an answer to the question I was going to ask about how you build a culture where fundraising feels like a team sport and not just a department's job, and getting staff members, board members, others involved in that thank you process seems like one of the easiest ways to help build that culture. Um, and that helps with organizations that are small too, that often don't
Right.
have a lot of capacity. But I am wondering what advice you would give to those smaller organizations that really want to start building layered donor relationships, but have such limited capacity, limited funds. What is there for them to do? How would you recommend they move forward?
Yeah. I think I would say keep it simple. Start small, but be really intentional. Um, Take your top 10 donors. Identify one additional connection
Mhm.
besides yourself if you're the natural driver, um, and commit to say 3 meaningful touch points across the year. Right? What can you do strategically to be something more than what the donor would be receiving already? And I think you'll naturally see a different level of engagement. And if you don't, right, that I think that's also a learning, right? And say what's not resonating. Like I mean, I often find we learn very quickly through this cultivation. Do donors respond to, in-person invites, more casual coffee conversations versus do they like to be seen out at, more donor events? We get a real clear indication of kind of where their drivers are, that really influences what the potential next steps will be, right? We think we may know, but until we really engage them through this kind of strategic cultivation, we don't. So we need kind of a simple way of testing that. And you don't need a really big system. You don't need even a CRM to track this. You have a simple Excel spreadsheet, and you just say, donor A, here's kind of going to be their primary part person. Here's going to be their secondary person, and here's the next 3 touch points we're going to do. Fall, winter, spring, and keep it really simple, and then see kind of what that does, and then revisit it. Was that enough? Did it feel like there was too much time between conversations? Because for some people, three times 3 touch points is enough. But for others, right, you can start to sense that with that level of communication that they want even more. And so I think it's kind of building that cadence that feels really natural for each donor.
Yeah, great advice for smaller organization just wanting to start small, start simple, but make some difference early. So thank you for that. And finally, what's one practice or mindset you think every nonprofit leader should adopt to elevate their efforts on the cultivation side of things?
Um, I would say treat fundraising as leadership work, not just financial work.
Okay. Okay.
Fundraising at the end of the day is about aligning people around purpose and about building trust to your organization over time. I think when we see fundraising as part of the mission, you elevate everyone's sense of ownership, and kind of new possibilities of what's possible when we join together, for the future of an organization. So that's
I
what I'd
got
say.
no, I got goosebumps there thinking about the reframing of fundraising work as leadership work, as um, leadership development opportunities. And there are lots of different ways to interpret that. And I'll leave it for the audience to come up with some ways that they might be able to use that. But I do think that, fundraising as a term has been cheapened a little bit. There are ways that people have made it almost feel negative or unnecessary or cheap when it is actually essential, vital, crucial. And if we can connect it deeper to true leadership, as a donor or as a fundraiser, professional development person, I think that's really necessary and appropriate. So thank you for that. And Keegan, thank you for being such a force for good out there. I also want to just thank you for your time here and thank everyone also for being a part of today's audience. If you like this content, if you want more, either fundraising or leadership development or skill sharpening, check out, like, and follow this podcast, Mastering Fundraising, or Lead for Good, or The Nonprofit Edge, all three brought to you by Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership. But for today, that's all we got. And thank you again, Keegan. Look forward to seeing you all on our next episode. So check it out. Until then, take care and be safe, everyone.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.